You're listening to Pardon the Disruption with your host, Tom Young.
Hello, welcome to Pardon the Disruption. This is Tom Young. Let's go around the room.
Hey, this is Bart Gallo.
This is TJ Young.
And this is Rohan Kapoor.
Great. Thanks, guys. Hey, today we're going to talk about a disruption that's happening in the economy. People talk about this a lot, and it has to do with what is the impact of AI on jobs. You know, you'll hear people say, well, it's going to create all new jobs. There'll be some disruption for sure. And then you'll hear other end of the spectrum that AI is going to kill jobs. People like Elon Musk and others will talk about that. Specifically, I think when I saw him talk about this last year was around the transportation sector, specifically truck drivers, which is one of the number one jobs in terms of number of jobs. Those jobs being eliminated through the automation of vehicles. So what are your guys' thoughts on this notion? Because I want to revisit this topic and deconstruct it a little bit for our audience.
I think in recent years, it's been a net creator of jobs, but that will not last. I think because the hype behind automation was probably sold too much too soon. And I think, deploying RPA, deploying AI, all these different types of machine learning algorithms or tools that utilize those technologies, if not done correctly, will just create more chaos and complexity into an ecosystem. And you need more attention from human workers to kind of manage those environments. But as this technology kind of really progresses, I think the rate at which we can create new jobs will not really keep up with the rate at which we can automate them.
So would you say we're still in the early phases of AI adoption within the economy?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. And I think in those early phases, we're going to start to see probably a net job creation and a labor shortage in those new jobs. We see that today in our consulting business, right? There are more opportunities than there are people to fill them.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a big problem, especially when you're talking about the supply of people with the skill sets to actually do this stuff. I saw the other day MIT is investing heavily, I think $1 billion into new educational programs to train people in AI and a lot of the automation jobs. But I agree. I mean, I think the net result is not positive, especially when you're looking at these low skill workers. Think 3.5 million truck drivers in the US, and where are they going to go when their trucks are automated? You have autonomous lorries. What are they going to be doing? Where are they going to go? What are the jobs that are going to be available to them? And it's scary.
I think it's an important point because we can go all the way back to the 1800s with the Luddites, when we started to see technological revolutions through mechanization, in this case of textiles in England. Ned Ludd, who led the Luddite revolution, was basically saying that technology was destroying jobs. And in economics, they would teach this concept called the Luddite fallacy. That said, for sure, jobs would be impacted by technology, but that it would be a net positive in the long term, right? So that things would shift around. And that's been true for almost 200 years. The issue is it will come a point where it's not true. And I think my hypothesis is that it will not be true for two reasons. One is the prior innovations that we've had in this society were analog innovations. So when I mechanize a farm worker, or I mechanize a factory worker or a textile worker, I have to build something, I have to scale it out, I have to engineer it, I have to deploy it, I have to maintain it. And there's a speed at which that can happen. It can't happen overnight. It takes, in some cases, decades for those things to manifest. And it allows people to have time to adjust. So you'll see people move out of places that are impacted from the agrarian and industrial economy to the Rust Belt, moving into service sectors and higher paying jobs. And it's been a net positive for the industry. So in B school, they'll teach the Luddite fallacy. But then the issue becomes, when is it no longer true? And the term, the Luddite fallacy, which is a point in which this is no longer true. What's your sense, Bart? What do you think?
Well, I think if you look at the large-scale economic trends, some of the analog innovations you mentioned in the 1800s, and if you think about the rise and prosperity of the middle class in the 20th century, you could kind of see a trend of productivity in the economy rising with more disposable income in the pockets of the average working class, or blue-collar class, as some would call it, person. And I think as large companies start to adopt AI technologies on a larger scale, you're going to see more of this trend that's already happening, where productivity rises just continue to lead to more wealth concentration, because the decreasing labor component of more productivity means that disposable income is not only no longer increasing in the pockets of the average worker, but it's decreasing, and I think it's going to be decreasing at a more rapid rate as proportional to the rate at which these technologies are adopted.
So how do you, if we're moving towards a society where there's going to be a net loss in job creation because of these technological advancements, how do you can't protect against it, but what do you do? Is it a personal thing where you have to say, from a development standpoint, you've now got to get comfortable with the fact that retraining and reskilling is going to be a norm, and you're not going to be able to sit in a job for 30 years and just kind of sit on the bench and be hidden?
Yeah, I think that's one element of it for sure. And there's going to be some of those residual jobs to manage this complex technology. But I think probably the broader concern in the longer term is, how much reskilling can you do when the skills gap is too large for what will probably be a decent portion of the population, just the difference in what that job used to be versus what managing the technology that now does that job is like, and what skills it requires.
In the past, again, you could say in the agrarian culture, it took about 100 years for basically an agrarian society, basically the family farm, to convert over to what we see today. That took a long time, and it wasn't overnight. It happened in waves. The Industrial Revolution is probably, in terms of the mechanization of what happened there, first a lot of factory workers show up, and then those workers were replaced by mechanized lines. That probably took 30 years. And those are generational time windows. It allows people to re-educate themselves and to change and to move up and move into more higher paying jobs. So more people go to college today and learn white collar jobs, which tend to be higher paying than the blue collar jobs. But I think there gets to a point in time where we have to recognize that the pace of change, once we pivot to digital, and we see this in a lot of nonlinear technologies, the pace of digital exceeds the ability of our society, whether it be us individually, because we're limited by our biology, or us societally and economically, because we're limited by the social constructs that we have, to adjust fast enough to compensate and adjust for those disruptions that we're seeing. So in the early phases of AI, that's why I asked TJ the question earlier, do we think we're in the early stages? And I think the answer we would probably all agree to is, yeah, we are in the early stages.
Yes.
So we're not seeing the major disruptions that are likely. We're seeing early indications of those disruptions. And it's actually creating, I would say, argue a job shortage. But it's a short-term false indicator of what the long-term impact is going to be.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because you also see we're flooded. I think the jobs report came out in the US recently, and it was, another huge uptick in, huge reduction in the unemployment rate. So many jobs created. I guess that you're going to see that number gradually go down, or is it going to be a drop off the cliff?
There's going to be a shift in job types, but so McKinsey kind of revisits the whole topic of automation, digital labor, AI in terms of its economic impact every few years. I think in 2017, they partnered with UC Berkeley to put out kind of a study on, they kind of shifted the way they looked at the impact it will have on jobs. Instead of looking at just jobs as it stands today and then look at how jobs will shift in the future, they were looking at tasks, like activities, the types of tasks that could be automated by today's technology. So their And they're not saying, sometimes they come out with a forecast saying, hey, by 2025, we say this many $1 trillion worth of economic impact will happen because of automation. This time around, they didn't really put a timeline to it. They just said, based on the activities that we perform, about half of all activities can be automated by today's technology. So that percentage can go up in the future, but regardless of job that uses different flavors of different activities,
Right.
half the activities can be automated. So that has to be addressed.
It's a question of the company's or the industry's abilities to restructure what those different jobs are
Right.
made up of those different
You can
tasks.
reshuffle the deck, but at the end of the day, the totality of the deck will be half as much.
Right.
So think about our consulting gigs that we've done, right? So we go in and we deploy automation, and one of the first learnings that we have is that no automation that's out there in today's market, for the most part, and there's going to be exceptions to this, but for the most part, no automation technologies are replacing a knowledge worker 100%. What they're replacing are, TJ said, a portion of the tasks that they do. So if I look at a 40-hour work week, I may be able to take 8 hours, 12 hours, 20 hours of work and compress that down to a digital output by a bot or an AI and save myself a lot of time. Now, what we're finding then is, what are they going to do with the rest of their time? And how are you going to restack the work? And what skills do you need to fill that time up with more important stuff? And so we're seeing that, and I think what's happening right now is that's creating a net job creation in the short term. So the unemployment rate, I throw up on the screen. You guys can see it up here. It's important to understand the way that the U.S. government reports unemployment. So the official unemployment rate is a measure from the Bureau of Labor Statistics called U3. And roughly what it means, and I'll probably get the definition not exactly right, it's people collecting unemployment under unemployment insurance. So it's a number of people divided by the number of workers. So it's a measure of the people collecting unemployment benefits relative to workers. So if you've given up, you're frustrated, that's U5. So they add U5, it adds about almost a full point to the unemployment. These are people who have tapped out, whose unemployment insurance has gone beyond whatever it is, 99 weeks or whatever the limit is. And that's a higher number. It's people just say, I'm never going to get another job. And so they're not in there. So it's important to look at workforce participation.
Right.
Would that include like early retirees?
It could. You can't ascribe motive in some of these things. It's just simply saying mechanically, U3 is number of people collecting unemployment insurance, and you have to do some proofs to get that insurance, right? You have to get that benefit divided by the number of workers, and that ratio is U3. U5. There's I think 6 measures. I'm just going to talk about the important ones. U5 is it adds the people who have tapped out on the unemployment insurance, so that's another point. But then U6 is the broadest measure, and it measures underemployment. So people who are employed in the denominator in the case of the ratio, who are underemployed. Maybe they're working part-time, maybe they're working as a waiter, maybe you have a chemical engineer who's stocking shelves, right? And so that's the broadest measure. And if you look up on the screen, and you can go look these things up on the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but we've been trending down since the end of the last recession, right? And what's interesting, if we go to look at workforce participation next to this, that's been going down since 2000, and then just recently it ticked up the last 2 quarters. It's gone up a little bit. But I think it's a little bit of a false indicator. My sense is, go back to we're talking today. We're trying to get a sense of answering this question: will the technologies that we're talking about, when we talk about pardon the disruption, the disruptive technologies, will they ultimately disrupt to the point where they are a net destroyer of jobs? Not that will new jobs be created. They absolutely new jobs are going to get created. Are they going to be created in greater numbers than the jobs that are being eliminated or obsoleted? And I'll leave you with one other concept you guys can talk about this on this point. half the people have an IQ of 100 or less. And if I were to say that in terms of agrarian culture or industrial culture where people had to work in a factory or, physical labor, if I said half the people had a maximum strength capability of XYZ, you would say as the jobs required you to be stronger and stronger, you just simply don't have that physical capability. Well, IQ would suggest in knowledge work, you have to have a certain mental capability to move up the cognitive curve. Half the people, by definition, are at 100 or less. And in today's advanced economy, you can imagine what a struggle it is for somebody who has, say, a 90 IQ to be able to get a good job, make enough money to buy a house, have a family. They could probably do it in certain things, but it's a struggle. And so when we talk about the new jobs, you have to think about the fact that there are limits to people's ability to train up. I mean, think about the training that we've gone through to do some of the things. Do you think everybody can do it?
Yeah, it's twofold, right? And we talk about this a lot, the whole attitude and aptitude. Probably not is the truth, honest answer. And then it's a case of, well, who's going to step in, and when it becomes a really big issue, who's going to step in and help these people, and how are they going to help them? Because they can't just, it's not a case of offering them the training if the training is going to fall on incapable ears, right?
And if we're talking about net job increase or net job loss, there's a point at which, as these machines advance, and we are still early in this whole bot, automation, AI trend, there's a point at which we cross where, as a new job is created, a job being, I have a set of things I need to get done, and I need someone to fill that job so it's completed. There's a point at which training a bot or some AI system or some algorithm to do that job, if it's assuming it's more of a soft job, something that's a knowledge work on a computer, it'll be easier to train or use computer tools, digital tools to complete that job or to have that job satisfied rather than training a worker. Right now, humans are very, very adaptable. I mean, in comparison to kind of rigid robotics. So it's cheaper in the short term to train an unskilled worker, unskilled beforehand, to go learn a new task. But as these tools advance, as new things are needed to be done, if I'm a business owner, I'm just going to train a robot to do it. So even if it's a net job increase in terms of, we're going to do more things as a species, as a company, I won't even look at a human. Humans need not apply.
Yeah, because it's a one-off investment in training that robot versus...
Right now we excel in terms of the achieving a plateau on the learning curve. And robots can optimize way past us in very, very narrow circumstances. But as they kind of fill the gaps between those narrow, steep inclines, it'll change the way that we look at, hey, I need to staff this new operation for this new job.
Right. And those software protocols may begin solving problems that are so complex that it's not a matter of it's more efficient or cost effective to deploy that technology rather than training a person. But, and you talk about this a lot, Tom, the person can't even participate in the ecosystem of solving that problem in the new way that it's now solved, doing it with technology.
And I would also argue we're seeing early indications from a government policy perspective of a recognition that people in the back half of the curve here have to be supported through some sort of wealth transfer or welfare.
Right.
So I don't know what the percentage is, but it's something like half the people are having their income subsidized by the government, either through Social Security, through welfare, through indirect subsidies and payments. And my sense is that's going to increase. It's not going to decrease. And in fact, we see the discussion at some level. When it first was introduced, I thought it was a joke, but it's not a joke anymore. The notion of universal basic income. People are really seriously talking about it as a means of dealing with this issue, because we see in digital markets a concentration of wealth that is as a result of the fact that I need less people, less labor to complete a product for a good and service. So think we use Netflix Blockbuster example. In order for you think of Blockbuster as bricks and mortar store with agents working or clerks working in the store, stocking the shelves, maintaining the building, the drivers who are getting stuff to and from there, and you compare that to digital streaming services. If I had 60,000 people working, I now have 6,000. It's just physically less jobs because it's digital. I can transmit it out. I don't need that physical infrastructure. And so we're going to start to see that challenge, and that's why I think universal basic income is being discussed. We're going to have to do this. So we're seeing early indications of us addressing the fact that people are struggling at the back half of this curve.
I think also that we've focused with the talk is very US centric. The discussions we've had about US lorry drivers, but imagine going to somewhere like India where you have
Did you just say lorry?
Lorry.
Is that like a taxi?
No, lorry is a UK term for truck.
Oh, really?
Oh, truck. Okay, I wasn't sure what that meant.
Yeah, lorry.
I actually
drivers.
guessed taxi in my head too for whatever reason.
No, it's
Yeah.
the US speech coming in. But in countries like India, where you have 300 million people, same size as the entire population of the US, who don't have access to electricity, and now you're talking about some really rapid advancements in the tech deployments in that country. That's going to be insane. The gap that's going to be widened there, and
Right.
that's an even bigger issue that people may not even, because it's hard enough for people to imagine what we're talking about in a developed country like the US. But imagine you take the same technological changes which are happening here as in India, which it's definitely happening at a rapid pace. That's a huge problem.
But also, the other side of that spectrum is also
Right.
equally interesting. So, take this to an extreme for a very developed nation like the U.S. Think about the way we measure or regard, economic prosperity. So this measure we're talking about, U3, U5, U6, we want that percentage to be as low as possible because we need people to show up to work and continue working. If you look at the country as a country as a whole, shouldn't prosperity, a measure of prosperity, be looked at in terms of if we can get more done with automated machines at a cheaper rate, shouldn't the wealth of the nation increase as a whole?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we would be better off if the work that we had to do in totality could be augmented more so by the machines that we produce. The issue becomes that the individual is left on the wayside, right? So the point you brought up before is what we're going to have to talk about around the extreme wealth concentration. We think it's bad today. We think it's worse in India today. It's not going to be even close to what it will be in the future as this job impact progresses.
And by the way, it's accelerating fast. I don't have the statistics handy, but the amount of wealth concentrated in the top 10 people, even as much as 5 years ago, it was dozens of people. Now it's in the top 10.
Right.
So I'm going to leave two more points because we're getting to the end of our time block here. And we'll just discuss these briefly and maybe we'll use them for a future topic. But one is the notion that we talk about the progress of automation or mechanization or limiting the drudgery of work as a good thing. And I think there's a sense, at least within the worker community, et cetera, we'd love to see that happen. But at some point, is our purpose as humans, and do we want people to have something productive to do, to work in a sense? If we think of work as drudgery, then it's probably no. But at some level, what's our purpose if we're not working or contributing? Do we think we can have a purpose if it's all life of leisure?
Well, I think I would say that you need some kind of purpose in that way. I think the difference here is that how much freedom do you have to define that purpose?
Yeah. The last point I'll ask you guys about is, and just think about this, is, we're free to say whatever we want here, right? I mean, no one's putting a gun to our head saying, say it this way or say it that. That's I want your guys' opinion. But if it was a net job destroyer, and you look at people like Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or a politician, would they even be in a position to say the truth? or do they have to say, oh, this is all going to be good for everybody? They're going to be winners for sure. There's no issue about that. The issue is, would they be able to even tell the truth? Because I think when I talk about this with people, and I've been talking about this for years, because my supposition over the last 5 or 6 years is that the job destruction is coming. I can't speak with a surety as exactly when, but it's coming. And people will point to, all these high-ranking people in the industry and politics saying, no, it's going to. And then they look at the recent reports and they'll see it's getting better. And I'm not disputing that it is getting better in the short term and the people are saying those things. I'm simply saying that if what my point of view is true, would people be even free to say it in today's society?
You're not going to hear those industry tycoons proposing new socialist policies.
Not from those guys, but I think there's some smart people out there. Like, I don't think Sam Harris pulled any punches in his TED Talk on AI from a couple of years back.
No.
And he doesn't seem to have a horse in the race the same way those guys do, at least.
The people who said that it's going to be a net job destruction, because I pay attention to this because I'm looking for people who support my hypothesis, obviously, would be Sam Harris. And I would encourage people to go to the TED Talk to listen to that. And again, he talk about the timing, he talks about the eventuality.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen Hawking, who's passed this past year, but he was also saying that it's going to be a net destroyer. And Bill Gates and Elon Musk, they've all said the same thing. And Musk was probably the most stark and most, but that's his,
the exchange with
nature.
Zuckerberg, right?
And so we can't get into that. This is a big topic. This is gonna creep up. In today's, we just had this huge jobs report. People are looking the other way, but I think this is coming.
Yeah.
It's also going to turn into more of a politically charged debate because we quickly
Absolutely.
get into, I think personally, I'm not a fan of these policies today, as you may know, if you know me personally, but I think it's almost inevitable that we have to kind of absorb and implement more socialist policies in the future if we want peace for the common man. But again, it's going to turn into a heated political debate between those policies, how extreme they are, and when it makes sense to implement them, like universal basic income.
Right. The political battle there will be, this is a different state of society that we're in now, proposing these ideas. It's not the same thing it was before. Mm-hmm. So I think that'll be a tough sell for some people, just kind of in society.
You'll see more extreme progressive tax rates to subsidize the UBI systems.
And then that might even polarize our political landscape even more than today, right?
Well, think about the whole discussion is around, hey, this person's not working, and I'm subsidizing his house, his home, his life. Right. So that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah.
Just to leave you to think about.
So let's put that on our agenda to discuss UBI at some point in the future. As what would that look like? How would that manifest? And this is obviously a politically charged topic. We're never going to cover it in a 20-plus minute discussion here. But we wanted to introduce this notion and let people start thinking that it might not all be sugar plums and roses. There could be a long-term storm on the horizon. And the issue is we want people to start thinking about it and start looking for early solutions. Because I think if we wait to see the effects of the disruption in a negative sense, it'll be too late. I think it might be too late as it exists, but the earlier we discuss this, I think the better off we are societally. Yeah,
and if people want to post comments on their thoughts on even the opposing argument, be interesting to see what the listeners think on the opposing side as well as this side that we presented.
So Rohan, we have a meetup coming up in New York on this topic.
Yep. So we've got a meetup coming on the 23rd. We've got a really cool special guest for that. CTO of IBM Watson's going to be there, Rob. Hi. And we're going to have a debate about the winners and losers in this digital revolution. So it's going to be televised live. It's going to be in New York City if anyone's around, and it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that. This is obviously will be a continuing conversation. So any parting thoughts from everybody? Yeah. That's good.
Good.
All right, thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show today, Pardon the Disruption. If you enjoyed our discussion, I'd invite you to head over to our homepage at www.rumjog.com. You can go there and check out our perspectives page and hear more podcast episodes, read some articles. It's some pretty interesting stuff. You can get access also to our Digital Disruption series. This is a meetup that we do mostly in New York and New Jersey area, where we discuss the impact of these technologies on our society and the way we live and work. We do this alongside of industry experts in various fields like crowdsourcing, automation, and blockchain, the technologies that are disrupting our world today. Anyway, if you like that, you can also follow us on social media at Twitter on the handle @Rumjog. We look forward to hearing more from you. Thank you.